What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Shiv Show. And boy, do I have someone very special here for you today. Now, today's guest is the guy who actually pushed me to start a podcast. And I remember standing up at his conference and saying that I believe I would start an app developing company. He looked right over to me and he said, "No, you're not. That's not what you're going to do." He immediately looked at me and said, "No." Today's guest is a leadership mentor. He is a global speaker. He's shared the stage with the likes of Tony Robbins and Gary Vee and Sir Richard Branson. And lastly, today's speaker, and this is probably the most important point to me, today's speaker saw something in me when I didn't actually see it myself. So Aaron Sansoni, the big brother, it is an honor and a privilege to welcome you to the Shiv Show today. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you, buddy. And I love hearing you say that. I love the Shiv Show because being there from that very start, actually, to be fair, the first thing you ever said to me, I said, "What's your name?" You stand up and you said, "Shiv, like the knife." That's what he said. So my security, like, did he just say, "Shiv, I have a knife"? They're like, did he just say you've got a knife, a shiv? Like, my security is bracing for this to tackle, tackle the Shiv man himself. Yeah. And I remember that. I actually remember the very first time we met, and that's, I get to meet hundreds of thousands of people, fortunately, on and offline in the course of 12 months. And just to remember that, I remember that beginning, and I'm so proud of you, buddy, to see you kicking goals within your work, to see you kicking goals personally. I mean, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like, that was, we met even before, maybe you met your current, right? Even before you met your girlfriend you're engaged to now. Yeah. When did you meet? What year did you meet?
I met her in 2017, and I think I met you in 2016.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Because I'm like, hang on a second. Because I remember one of our mentoring calls that we had. I remember, in fact, I want to find the notes because I'm an avid note taker. And I'm pretty sure that you were like, you hadn't, you were looking for the one, and I think that, so cool, man, for you to be engaged, to have your own Shiv Show. I remember you said to me, the first time, like your mom listened to it. It was like all around the world, in all these countries. And I'm like, of course you do, man. Look at you. You're an amazing human. You had this huge weight loss journey as well, which you don't tell anybody about. I'm like, you lost like 4 times your body weight.
Yeah.
But I'm proud of you, mate. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Impacting people, big smile on your face, giving back, and well done to you on that.
Thank you very much.
To me, I can try and kick you in the right direction, buddy, but you have to take the MIAA. You got to get the shit done, and that's this is me. That's why I loved seeing this result, buddy. So well done to you.
Thank you. And I don't think you understand how big of a part of that journey you were, in there for me. So thank you. And I want to get into that pretty soon. But listen, like I said before we started recording, I've been waiting to do this for 3 years. So I had a list and pages of questions. So I won't go into them too much today. But I do want to start off by asking you this. And I think that you have a great ability to see the potential in people. And I think that's a learned skill. So how did you develop that sort of skill to see the potential in people? Because I can imagine, I've witnessed it, you have people coming to you, Aaron, that think they do not have any potential at all, and you find it in them. So where does that come from?
Yeah, look for me, there's the answer is a few facets. I think number one, I've had the privilege of, as you said in your intro, I mean, I have had the privilege of being around the world. We've got students now in 116 countries. I've done online events now. I think we've had 42 country participants. I've done live events in over 22 countries. I've been in front of hundreds of thousands of people. We're in front of between 15 and 25,000 people, just last year. And some years we're in front of 15,000 people per event. It just depends on who we're working with at the time. And so to answer your question, I used to think that there's 7 million people, Shiv, and they have 7 million different problems. And I think I learned really early on that interestingly that they don't. I think that we've got we've got like a handful of problems, that people kind of have in life and in business. And, like I spend most of my time teaching people to live a life by design, not by default. And that just means making choices, making decisions, like if you grew up in a family where, you just ate, and you had the body you didn't want to have, and you want to go, okay, I want to trim down and have the, the kind of body that you have now working out. Well, you've got to make different choices. You got to live a design life versus a default life. Default life is I'm used to having bacon and eggs every morning. Design life is actually my body type says I should have birch, or I should have oats or something, or a banana, or fast, or whatever it may be. So I learned really early on, when I was meeting so many people, I was blown away with, like, I'll have someone in front of me, Shiv, and like there's someone in Vietnam and they're talking through a translator, telling me all their problems in life. I'm sitting there going, you could be speaking to me, you could be English, you could be Canadian, you could be American, you could be Australian, you could be Vietnamese. And I don't care about the dialect you're speaking, or the color of your skin, or the gender or your age. Like, there's only a certain amount of problems people and businesses have. And I think that early on, I started to be in front of a sheer volume of people, Shiv. You start to kind of go, you kind of sum it up pretty quickly. You kind of get that rhythm. It's like, when you date and you kind of see a similar looking girl or a similar looking guy or a similar acting girl, you kind of can pick up,
understand the personalities and
what they do. Sometimes you walk in a bar and you're like, he works in sales. Like, you just know it. Like, he works. So it's kind of like that for me. I think with business, it became is kind of almost a bit wanky as it sounds, Shiv. It became a bit Matrix-ish. Like I just get it. And I think that that was not a taught skill whatsoever. It was a learned skill. It took me time to do that. And then I think in a combination that is that the reading people became a learned skill, but became a learned skill. The taught skills are the things that I just from, books, reading books, from studying, from mentoring. And I was the kid that grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, that hated school. So for me to go out there and learn and then even educate, to think about one of the things I do in my life now is education, is just blows my mind away. People sometimes call me an educator. I'm like, don't call me an educator. I sound like a teacher. Don't do that. So look, for me, to answer your question, a lot of hours on the road, meeting a lot of people, solving a lot of problems, and learning how to just get into people's souls and their minds, their business, and then help them to succeed, because not everyone comes from an environment where people see greatness in them. And sometimes they have a parent that supports them, but then the parent gets to a point where they're like, I don't want them to be hurt. I don't want to see them get hurt. Don't push yourself too hard, because you're going to get, and don't put your name out there and you're going to get bad reviews and shit on Facebook. And like, it just,
sounds
only, you know what I mean? Like, exactly. Cheerleaders only get to a certain point. And then sometimes it's like, well, hang on, even the ones that love you the most. So I just think that I meet people sometimes, and everyone has greatness in them, Shiv. It's just whether they're willing to show it, and there's no way you can cut up this conversation. It takes work, it takes dedication, and it takes you pushing through to a point where you say, I don't care what people think. I'm doing this for me, and I'm doing this for the right reasons. And you hit that point. So look, for me, it was a combination of being around the world, helping 300,000 people now have come through some of our live events, and I just don't have time for bullshit, Shiv. If I meet someone and I'm like, you need to be doing this, and they're like, but I'm, excuse. I'm like, go fuck yourself, right? I'm not going to swear on your shit. I'm like,
go ahead, man. Go ahead.
I'm like, you think, I've got so many problems. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? You have problems. You, as a dude who is, living in Australia, who can speak English, who has a job. I'm like, go fuck yourself. You have problems, right?
Can I just say, I just want to interject, because this is going to tie in perfectly to why I was so drawn to you anyway, right? So I want to tell a quick story. I went to NAC, and I think you and I have spoken about this before. I went to NAC in 2016 because Tony Robbins was going to be there. Yeah. And that's literally the only reason I went, was to see Tony Robbins. And they did the thing where he came out the second day, not the first day, right? So we went the first day, full day. Second day, he came out. Now, we had a lot of speakers that day, and I think everybody was exhausted. And you came out. And what drew me to you was that you literally did not take any bullshit, and you called out the crowd of, I don't know how many thousand people were there, but you called out the entire crowd. And for you to do that and have that much control, I really, really admired. I mean, you could hear a pin drop in that auditorium, and that's what drew me to you. So you're right. You don't like bullshit. I think that's literally what drew me to you. And I said to myself that I was the excuse guy. I give excuses all the time, and I needed somebody to kick me in the ass. I needed somebody not to tell me what I want to hear. And you were the person to do that in my life at that time, which was amazing. So yeah, no bullshit. And I love that.
And what I love about you, Shiv, is that you were the guy that, you were employed. Like, you still have a job, and I think unless something's changed, tell me. But you were employed, and you're like, listen, Aaron, I don't know if I want to start this kind of empire. And, I get known for sort of building up these empires. But what I love about you is you didn't say, okay, I'm going to wait till my job's done. I'm going to go. You're like, okay, well, I want to do something. And you just believed in yourself, and you went out there and, you work for, I think, and I read in the paper, tell me if I'm wrong, was like the number one place to work. Is that right?
Place to work in Australia. Yeah, it is.
Exactly.
It is.
Right. Were you in the photo, like in the real background with your hand up or something? I'm like, I saw the background. Like, is there someone? I'm looking for your face.
I was in the one last year. They should have used that picture.
Oh, you were?
They didn't.
Yeah, I know, right? Where's that picture, right? And so, like, you work in a great place, you work, and, for you to go and want to build a personal brand, I think there's so many people that go, well, I'm employed by somebody, so that's my box. That's all I can kind of work in. And, I know you've spoken at conferences that they've had, and you've spoken a couple of times at conferences that I've done, and the book and the show and I just, for me, I love that you didn't make excuses and, like, I've got to wait till perfect to go out there and get something done. You just went, in the words that I always use, which is fuck it. You're like, I'm just going to do it, So,
and literally that was my motto. That was my motto. There were a couple mottos you taught me, and we'll go into them, but fuck it was the one that was, and you know what?
That's one for the kids. You can teach the kids that one. That's one for the kids.
and coming from, you obviously work in the corporate world as well. And obviously with your own things that you own, but sometimes in the corporate world, it could be so corporate that they teach you to walk this straight line and that straight line only. And I literally had to say, fuck it. I need to be the guy that's going to zigzag my way to success. And it ended up really working for me. And listen, I ran into those walls, but I broke them down after some time. So you're just going to, you're going to run into walls. You just got to break them down.
Agreed.
That's really it. Yeah.
I love that.
Now, I do want to, the reason when people say, when they hear Aaron Sansoni and they look you up, they see successful businessman, they see, international speaker. Now, the reason I relate to you, and I think a lot of people relate to you, is once we get to know your backstory, we really understand that you were just a regular Joe, just like the rest of us. You were literally just a regular guy, and you had a lot more hardships than a lot of people go through right now. And, I don't want to go too much into the backstory because I think a lot of the listeners already know about you because I probably speak about you in 80% of my podcast. But when I was making notes, I remember at, I think the first conference, you showed a picture of yourself at a table. And I believe your wife took it. And it would have been, 10, 15 years ago. And you were surrounded by, I think it was books or papers, and you were you were sending out mail. You were mailing them individually. I think it was letters.
Direct mail.
And and I think your wife took this picture and she said, we're going to remember this picture. And now it's something that you share. And I think that's amazing. I even spoke to my fiance today and I said, I really want to ask Aaron about this picture. Can you just explain what that picture was and how much that picture means to you today?
Well, look, it means to me a lot because I grew up real quick. I grew up poor. I grew up in, parents divorced. Drugs and alcohol with my father, still drugs and alcohol with my father. And I grew up in the kind of environment where, I grew up in Melbourne and, I grew up in an area where, the best you could ever be was like the manager of Safeways, right? Which is now Woolworths. Like that's the number one dream job. And if only you get a car, like that was the thing because you get a car, that was like the big bonus, So for me, I grew up around people that didn't aspire to really be much. And, being in a blended family, we had steps and halves and like, are you related to me? I think so. Your cousin, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And, we grew up in such a blended environment that look for me, I had all the excuses not to be successful. And And I, had very different parents. I had my father, who was very loving and very caring, but just drugs and alcohol that just completely fucks your brain. So you're not getting your kid to basketball on time. You're not, you're not thinking like that. Well, my mum, who was just in this fight or flight mode type deal for a long period of time, and just trying to help us to survive. And look, I remember when I met my wife, my girlfriend at the time, obviously now my wife, I had nothing. Like I saved and saved and saved and saved, and I started the business, and I thought I knew everything, Shiv. I'm like, I know everything, because I came from sales, right? That was my thing. I was shit at it, and then I got good at sales. And so then I started businesses, and because I was so focused on selling and I thought I was so great at it, I then went and started my business. And of course, when you start doing it yourself, there's all these pressures and stuff that happens that you don't, like if you don't get a deal and you work for somebody else, it's like, shucks, but if you work for yourself, you're like, I can't pay rent, if you don't get it.
Correct.
So I saved 180 grand or something, a bit of money to go start businesses, and I used every dollar, and I didn't make a sale. And I hit rock bottom, and I was like, what am I going to do now? And I remember going to my wife, and we lived in Dandenong, right? Which is like one of the worst areas. No offense if you're from Dandenong, like represent, because I lived there. But like, this is a challenged area, drugs, alcohol. Like we lived between a drug user and a drug dealer. Like this is like, where we lived. And I remember saying to my wife, I'm trying to hustle, work my butt off. And I said to her, listen, I'd gone to a couple of things here and there, but I hadn't really learned much. I thought I kind of knew everything. I was just cocky and arrogant. And I convinced my wife, the biggest sale of my life, and I convinced my wife to take a third mortgage out on her apartment that she had, her flat that she had. I didn't have any property. I was trying to get in the property game or whatever. And so she gave me every dollar she could get out of the house, which is 15 grand. And I took that to go to a seminar and start to learn about how do I build my businesses. And of course, when you first go to hear speakers, you're like, wanker, idiot, dick. Like you kind of go through, and they're like, oh, that guy's all right. Oh, that guy's all right. And then sometimes you meet somebody that you just resonate with, or people that you just kind of go, makes sense. It doesn't feel like cheesy and weird. And I don't know. So I just, I decided to learn from lots of different people and lots of different seminars. And I just started to spend money on this weird thing called seminars and education. And this is coming from a guy that flunked school. So I was spending money on school. I'm like, no, thank you. Right. And I just realized I had to learn. And so along the way, I learned about marketing, and this was before the days of Facebook. And so one of them was about direct mail. And so I'm working 3 jobs, trying to start another business. And I'm at home, I'm trying to put together this mail out, and I couldn't work out mail merge on Microsoft Word, right? I couldn't work out mail merge. So I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. So I'm writing 1,000 handwritten envelopes of all of these names and addresses to send out my direct mail to. And then on the back of it, right, Shiv, I'm writing from, and I'm writing from me. And I didn't realize, my mate told me a couple of weeks later, it's like, why did you put a return label? People don't return junk mail. They don't give a shit about your junk mail. So I hand wrote return to, right? So it's just, my hand was killing me. So I'm putting these things together. 10:30 at night, my wife's a bit tired. I said, look, go to bed, I'll be right behind you. She wakes up at 4:30 in the morning, and she couldn't find me in the bed. So she came out into the lounge room, living room, kitchen. That's all we had. It was one room. It was bedroom and everything else room, including kitchen. And that was where we were living. And I'm sitting there at the table folding these things, because I didn't, you didn't have folders back then, licking stamps, sticking stamps, you name it. I'm handwriting envelopes. Yeah. My wife she looks at me and she goes, what are you doing? It's 4:30 in the morning. I'm like, I hadn't slept. I was up all night. And I was working, and so she grabs the camera back then, the old camera, the Canon cameras that you have to take a photo before they're on the phones and all that kind of stuff. And she goes to take this photo, and I had my headphones on in the photo, and I took it off for the photo, and there's a photo of me with my headphones off with the cord, obviously no Bluetooth back then. And she says, Aaron, what are you doing? She says, it's 4:30 in the morning. She said, you need to be at work in an hour and a half. And my wife I hadn't gone to bed. And I literally was up. I was working a job during the day, at nighttime. I was working 3 jobs to try and make ends meet, because I thought I was going to make it in business, and I didn't. Yeah. And then I took my headphones off, and I said something to my wife. And as she clicked the camera and took a photo of me, just as she said that, these words came out of my mouth, which I always remember. And it's the reason why I cherish the photo so much, Shiv. And I said to my wife, if I don't get this done, I'll always have to be at work in an hour and a half.
Wow.
And I put my headphones on and I kept going. And the reason why it was so important to me, Shiv, is that everyone said you shouldn't do that. Like, you're working too much. I mean, that was like, you work too much, it's too hard. And, you know, for me, I forfeited going out with the blokes, you know, going out for drinks, hanging out with my mates, just trying to build something. And I remember saying to my wife, if I don't do this, I'm always going to have to work. And, you know, at the time, Shiv, I've worked in jobs I hated, companies I hated, nothing like your business, your company, selling products I didn't believe in, bosses that were dickheads, you know, like, I'm just like, and I just like, if I keep going, I'm never going to make something of myself. And that meant so much to me because my wife captured a moment where I'd worked 24/7. I hadn't gone to sleep. And it was one of many nights. Like, it wasn't a hero enough. You ask my wife, she'll say, you've never met an at-work husband ever. Like, you just, and it's not, I worked in silence, Shiv, before people noticed. I get interviewed sometimes and they say, because I've been doing this for 15 years and I'm still in my 30s. I'm not, 50. And sometimes people say to me things like, oh, Aaron, what's it like? I feel like you've like exploded. It's like, what's
just
it like
overnight?
To be overnight success?
I hate that, but yes.
I'm like, okay, overnight success, right? So let me take you way back to, this kind of, like, people just see that, they see you start, like sharing the stage with Robbins when you met me in 2016. 2008, I'm sitting there, or even before that, 2005, I'm watching Tony Robbins going, fuck, this guy's amazing, right? Not thinking I want to be on stage. Oh my gosh, just like, oh, this guy's amazing. And then to be able to partner and work with that guy a couple of times, including the event that we met at, like, I'm just, and people are like, oh, what's like it's hustle, it's work, it's learning, it's strategies. And it's believing in yourself. It's like investing in yourself. It's like education. People think that if you just keep pushing, you're going to get somewhere. It's like, no, you got to learn what you need to learn.
You got to keep investing in yourself.
Totally. And you're going to hustle down. And look, for me, every dollar I spend returns me 15, 20 fold in my income. Every dollar I spend on learning helps me to be able to grow to who I am. And look, I love building empires. I love building businesses. I love helping people to live a life by design. And so for me, Shiv, that photo meant so much to me because it was one of those moments where I really felt I wasn't going to get anywhere working 3 jobs, trying to build my side hustle. And I also felt a bit embarrassed having to ask my wife for $15,000, and which is a third mortgage. And my wife gave it to me. And I want to share this with your listeners because I think it's so important. Logical. She's not an entrepreneur like me, right? At all, right? So she says to me, I'll give you the money, but she says, if you don't make this work, you're going to get a job, right? So she's, right? She's supportive, but she's like, hang on, you got to make this work. And so she's never, she's not an entrepreneur. She's, she's a teacher. She's never been, she thinks I'm fucking crazy being an entrepreneur. But you know what, for me, that was one of those moments that I look back and you can't just work hard. You've got to work hard. You've got to learn how to shortcut it by learning from people that have done it. Here's my prerequisite for mentors. Done it or taught others that have done it. Done it or taught others that have done it. Like, that's my period. You show me you've done it or you show me you've taught others that have done it. You don't have to be an Olympic swimmer to teach Olympic swimmers, but you have to have created other Olympic swimmers.
And
right?
I'm the same. Yeah, I'm the same actually when it comes to advice. So over the years, so many people have been trying to give me advice, and you always kind of take it. But now that we're trying to create our empire, you have to be very smart about who you take advice from and who your mentors are going to be. So I'm the very same. If you have done it, please give me all the advice that you can, because I'm trying to do what you've done. Or if you've taught people how to do it, that means you know what you're doing. But if it's coming from a place of, I'm going to tell you how to do it, but I haven't put anything myself out there, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, look, for me, Shiv, you said one of the things that really, attracted me, you and me, is that, I was just a bloke. I am still just a bloke. I'm just a guy. I might have more income, more impact, and more influence than your average guy. Agreed. You can't get around that I have those 3 things, but I'm still a guy. I shop, I eat, I go to the bathroom. I've got kids that fucking scream sometimes.
Yeah.
It's just, I fight with my wife sometimes. You know, it's just, I'm still a guy. I'm just trying to keep creating a life by design and trying to create the version of me that's the best of me. And I just don't have time for going slow. Like life goes, people say life goes fast. All the bullshit here. But I tell you this, you don't believe it until you either have or you're around young kids. Like when you have or you're around young kids, like my daughter now who's 6, I'm like, she's just gone, you know, she's just, you know, I think when we met, I didn't even have my son Roman now who's 3.
No,
Maybe 2017 maybe. And I'm like, he's already 3, you know what I mean? So it's just life goes so quick and people don't swing enough. They just don't go hard enough. And like, even if you fail, like even if you do a podcast and no one fucking watches it, who cares? Like, listen, who cares? Like you've done something great. You've connected with great people. You've made yourself proud. You made your mum proud. You know, you're doing something cool. You know, that to me is people attach themselves too much to, I've got to have an outcome. I'm like, you know what? Enjoy what you do. You live in a great place. I don't care what country you're from. If you can understand my words and Shiv's words, you're a lucky person because you understand English. You know, if you can afford to have Spotify, iTunes, or whatever the hell you're listening to, like you're doing
pretty well.
For that. All right. You know, so you know, that's just me. It's a bit, you know, some people will think it's crazy, but look, for me, I love trying to find a level of new level that you can take yourself to. And I don't have all the secrets. I know what works in business and maybe in personal development, you know, but that's me. That's my life I've dedicated to. And you know me, there's 3 things I do. It's run companies and build empires, my charity, the Aaron Sansoni Foundation, and teach. Pass on to people what I know, you know, and share with people and hopefully, because the thing is, look how many people you're inspired through what you do. I mean, some of you guys that are listening now might have never heard of me, and I'm okay with that, but you might have watched every other episode that Shiv's done, and you're like, wow, Shiv's amazing. And you know what? If that's the case, then Shiv's affected somebody that I'll never be able to affect, and he knows what that's called, and that's called an obligation ripple, right?
That's exactly.
You know? And you're rippling out, and maybe one of you listeners go, fuck, Shiv's a cool dude. Aaron's a cool dude. I'm going to go out there and, you know, be a better leader. I'm going to go out there and be less of an asshole to my wife. I'm going to go out there and start a business. I'm going to go, and you're going to start your own ripple, you know, in your own world. And who knows, if we keep throwing stones into a pond, I wonder if we can start enough ripples. I don't know, you know, that's
well, I mean, that's the game plan, right? Now that story, I know we're timing and I know you're such a busy guy, but I have a couple more questions.
No, go for it.
Based off that story, right? Because I know a lot of listeners, and myself included, we always have that fear of failure. And you said it before that you didn't succeed in business. So what kept you going? I mean, how did you, where did that courage come from to ask for that $15,000 from your girlfriend at the time? And now wife. I mean, where did that come from?
The first thing. Look, for me, I just knew that I didn't want to do things like everybody else. Like I don't know if anybody really does want to do the same thing that everybody else does, but I think people are just too afraid to go out there and really live a life on their own terms. And so my tip for getting over fear is create, like if fear's a boulder and you've got all these things on that boulder, like you've got fear of failure. You've got, like, what was one of your fears when you first started?
Fear of being judged.
Okay, fear of being judged. Let's put that in the pot. Let's do that. Yep. How about imposter syndrome? Fear of imposter syndrome. Let's put that in there. Right? Let's put that in there. You know, fear of being laughed at. Let's put that in there. Fear of like legal. I don't know enough. Whatever. Fuck. Too much. I want time away from my family. Like, let's fill the pot full of stuff. Right? Yep. We feel all this kind of fear. It becomes this boulder. Becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. My kind of short circuit to trying to unwork this, because this, like what we've just talked about in like 10 seconds, like that's some Dr. Phil shit, right? That's some work through that, work through that. Listen, you got to work through your shit, but here's my trick to get started. If you've got a boulder of 5, 6, or 7 things that are real fear-based for you that are holding you back, then let's think about Newton's law of physics. If I can create something with greater force, then that fear boulder suddenly it doesn't really matter anymore because this thing is going to overshadow the size of this. So what's this other thing I'm talking about? Is obligation.
Yeah.
If you create a greater reason why you need, not want, you need to be successful, right? So if we've got imposter syndrome, fear of failure, letting people down, all these fears, and we go up against I need to be able to create a life that for my children I never had. I need to be able to pass on to others things I never knew. You know, if you ever talk about health, what an obligation you have for being somebody who was overweight in your own terms and not feeling the best, and to go out there and share that legacy of how you can live that life in your own terms. Like, I also know your story. I know you were extremely close to your dad. And your legacy about obligation to learn, if you decide to be a dad and you guys can and you decide to have kids, well, your obligation to be the fucking standout father, to live in the shadows of what that brilliant man was with your father, to build all these things, this obligation that you have to serve your family, your children, those that need to listen and hear from you or pass on the things that you know, this boulder becomes massive. And so when you start to play with these boulders of fear, like, oh shit, fear's like this big now, right? Obligations like this big now. And you just create this boulder that you put together. You go fear, obligation. You're like, shit, this outweighs. And suddenly you get a big enough boulder, this is gone. This becomes the focus. It's obligation to serve, obligation to help others, obligation to do more, be more, have more. People talk about money is evil. Bullshit. It's what you do with money. It's what you do with money. Right? For me, money's not evil. You know, like for me, making money, like listen, I wanted to help out charities as much as I can. But you know what really helped out charities? Here's what helped out charities, right? Through making money was through sending a check for $125,000 to feed 250,000 people in Australia that couldn't eat food with the Oz Harvest Foundation, or helping 857 kids in the Starlight Foundation to brighten seriously ill children's life. Like that, you can have all the hope and dreams in the world. If you make money, and I make money through my venture capital firms and all the things we get to do, you make money. You can help people. How can I help 250,000 Australians that can't afford to eat? With fucking money, not with nice wishes and IOUs and likes on a post on Facebook.
Correct.
But actual money, right? So my obligation is that at one point, Shiv, I was the kid that couldn't eat properly. That's my obligation. My obligation is to go out there and feed more people. When the bushfires happen, to be able to go out there and put money on the line and go out there and instantly donate to the frontline people out there and go and help. When whole fucking COVID start to happen, to be able to go drop everything and go out there and produce copious amounts of courses and events and trainings and seminars online, like Survive and Thrive and all these things to like learn how to be able to get up and go. And like that is my level of how I can create that, where I can go out and I can share and I've got a bigger obligation. Now, all the other things I might have, in fear of what people think and judgment and you know what, put that up against obligation to serve other people. What if I let my fear of failure never let me speak on a stage with Tony Robbins and we never met? Do I think you would have got there eventually? Yeah. But do I think you would have got there quicker because we got to meet? Yeah, I do believe that. And if you've affected one person in your world, my obligation to help serve you and help you to become successful, it far outweighs my bullshit fear that I have. Because you know what? Fears are selfish.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be selfish. Fears are selfish. All the fears I can create, they're selfish to me. Whereas the obligation, the fear doesn't go away. Don't get me wrong. Some of the fear is still there, but the obligation becomes so much bigger. You're like, what fear? What am I talking? So while you're still kind of Dr. filling your way through all your fears, you still need to create a boulder that's big enough to let you take action. Get shit done, get started, get going. And for me, I live by that. You know what I mean? Like I live by the idea of that and be able to go out there and create money to be able to go out there and help 857 kids with the Starlight Foundation that are seriously ill, like the Make-A-Wish Foundation. That was in 2019. The year before, be able to give 125K to Oz Harvest and help them to feed people. Like, you know, that is me taking a stand against my fears years ago to create money. So I can go out there and actually give money with my wife and I in our charity. So look, for me, Shiv, fear is selfish. And the best way to get over fear is to create such a big boulder of the real reasons why you need to be successful that you can't even think anymore that anything could hold you back, because you have a huge obligation, which is the reason why, you know, I have this bad boy, you know, living in obligation all the time, because I think if you can live in obligation, you'll forget about your fears.
Yeah. And I want to just share a quick story. And this is when I launched my first episode of my podcast. I think I had a mentoring session with you maybe the week before. And I talked to you about me being super scared. And you told me, if you affect one person, you've done your job. You're going to keep on going and going and going. And I had my teacher from 8th grade message me and tell me that she had a fear of flying. And after listening to the first episode of my podcast, she went on and booked a trip to Australia, booked a trip to China, and just wanted to jump on a plane. And I read that message in the morning when I woke up after launching the first podcast, not knowing if this is going to be a complete failure or I'm going to change someone's life. And when I got that message, that was my obligation. I realized I'm like, that's my obligation right there. I'm literally going to change the entire game. I'm not, yes, of course I'm scared. I'm nervous and whatever, but that's here. That's that little boulder. And my obligation is huge. So thank you for teaching that to me. And thank you for making me realize that, actually.
You're welcome, buddy. You're welcome. And it's look, for me, I can help others to create. I'm one human being. I can't be everywhere. I can't be on every podcast. I can't be on every stage. I can't be speaking to you 24/7. So if I can go create others that start living their own obligation, then to me, that's my legacy. You know, it's not about creating money. You know, you get to a point where money's just money. You know what I mean? Like, it's just money. Yep. And when you grow up as a poor kid, I'm going to tell you, $1's all right. You know, like it's it's not like you don't have this infinite amount of money, that you want to kind of create. So look, for me, it's about passing on that legacy. But I just wish people Shiv, would allow themselves and give themselves permission to fail more. Mm-hmm. And to win more. Yep. You know, if you give yourself permission to fail and to win, then tell me what's going to hold you back. Yeah. Right. And I think the people need to do. I fail every day because I go so hard and so fast. I fail every day. But you know what? I know that I'm playing the game I want to play, and I'm walking to the beat of my drum. And sometimes people look at that and say, you know, that's a problem in society because it's so left of what others are doing. But look, for me, if I died today, I'll be a happy man. I'd be a sad man because everything I'd miss, but I'll be a happy man for how I live today. And I think that ultimately, Shiv, you have to ask yourself that if your day was ending today, are you proud of how far you've come and what you've done in your time? And if you answer that honestly as a yes, brilliant. But if it's not a yes or not even close to being a yes, then the question is, at what point are you going to hit the fuck it button and do something for you?
I love that. And I love the fail every day. And, you know, people look at me and they say, hey, you know, you're doing so much and you're successful. And I fail all the time, but that's why I keep moving. That's why I keep moving up and up, because I learn what not to do, and you learn so much from your failures. And I think I try to teach people the exact same thing, that failing is actually very okay. Yeah. You should be failing, because that means you're trying new things, right? So no, I think it's very important. I mean, it's such a great learning experience to fail and learn what not to do and try again. And it just means that you're actually out there and taking MAIA, right?
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Definitely. Now, final question for you, because again, timing. Now, what would you say your best memory today? What would you say your best memory is ever?
Oh, best memory ever. Oh, that's easy. That's my kids being born. As cliche as it sounds, 2 reasons. One, I was convinced my daughter was a boy. I was convinced my daughter was a girl. right? So like a quick story, we were convinced, like I'm like, my daughter's a boy. And so like the whole pregnancy, like we went overseas, like old ladies would like touch my wife's belly and be like, it's a boy, it's a boy, it's a boy. Everyone except my wife was like, this is a girl, you guys are fucking idiots. So then my daughter comes out, right? I'm there catching, right? And I'm there, I'm like catching, to give you a visual. And like I get my daughter, I put my daughter on my wife's chest, right? You can see like emotion, right? I put my daughter on my wife's chest. And I'm like, well, you're gonna child, it's great, right? I'm so convinced my daughter is a boy that I didn't even check. And so then my wife goes, is it a boy or a girl? I was like, let me check. And I was, imagine, you know, have you ever got a chicken that's like not cooked and you're like trying to get it ready for the roasting? Yeah. Yeah. I grabbed the leg like a chicken, like hock the thing up, right, like a chicken's leg. I think it's like a boy, so it's okay to kind of just hock the leg up like this. And I'm like, holy shit, it's a girl, right? And so it was the most weird, like for literally like what felt like 5 minutes, but was probably like 45 seconds where I'm like, this is a boy and a girl. So then my son came out, convinced it's a girl. Everyone's convinced it's a girl. My wife's saying it's definitely going to be a boy. So he came out and my wife says, and I quote, that's the loudest and the highest pitched squeal I've ever heard you make when you knew Roman was a boy. And that was obviously the son thing. You know, I had a girl. I was like, I need to have a son now because we wanted to have and so, yeah, that was easily the happiest moment of my life was having both my kids. And what the surprise was, and anyone out there having kids, don't find out the fucking sex. Don't do it. It's the best surprise in the world. There's so much, you know what? There's so much that you can predict. And I was like, oh, I need to buy stuff. Like they live in fucking onesies for the whole Just
get a unisex color. It's fine. Yeah.
Totally. Gray, yellow, white, fine, right? So, but if you can hold off, it's the best surprise in the world. It was the best surprise by far. So me, that's the best moment by far is my kids.
I love that. And funny enough, you know, don't find out the sex. My fiance and I always talk about it, and she wants to know. And I'm always saying, no, this is one of the only surprises life is going to give you. So we're going back and forth. Maybe after she listens to this podcast, she'll
totally. We'll tell her that Aaron, my mentor, said we can't, and we can't go against that, right? We're just going to do exactly what they say. But you know, it's the best surprise ever. I guess surprise ever. So look, well, good luck to you with that, buddy. I'd love to see you around more and see you kicking some goals.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm proud that you're putting the great word out there and helping people to be able to go on their journey to do some cool stuff.
Yeah. And listen, thank you so much. And again, I don't think you realize the impact that you've had on my life and not just mine, but literally hundreds of thousands of students out there, and everything from the inner circle, everything from having these one-on-ones with you. It is literally, I'm so pumped up right now. I feel like I'm going to start a business right after jumping off this call. So thank you so much. Thank you for everything that you do. I really do look up to you, and I'm sure again, thousands of other people do. And, keep leading. We're following in your footsteps.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you very much. And we will chat soon.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Bye.
See ya.